If this book exists, you're in the wrong universe. Monday, August 22nd, 11:11 p.m. Gingerbread men. Hunger at 86%. Joy. Joy knew that David squirmed every time he thought about what she really was, which was 777 beings functioning in a hive. Humans are like that, or at least the ones that she'd run into. The idea of a hive mind terrifies them, because, deep down, they love individuality and hate cooperation. The idea that this many beings can unite so perfectly and willfully that it becomes its own beautiful thing is so alien to them that she never even tried to explain it. David imagines it as an erasure of everything that makes life special, rather than as a kind of love that he can barely comprehend. That each individual human brain essentially operates as a hive, with competing impulses and agendas constantly warring for supremacy. Well, that's a conversation they're just not ready to have. When Joy looked at humans, she saw animals so detached from the food chain that their own boredom was eating them alive. None of their instincts made sense to them. They were primates, adorning themselves in skins and shiny things, all swagger and posturing with no idea what it's for. They were grotesque and ridiculous, and she loved them so much. They were all doing their best, and their best was just an appalling disaster. That was why she loved the nursing home. The residents were humans stripped of all their pumped-up self-regard, scared and forced to put their whole trust in someone else for the first time since childhood. How could you hate humanity after seeing them in that state, helpless and afraid, watching their strength trickle away? Even the worst of them, when reduced to that, become something that just needs to be fed and bathed and comforted. They begin that way, and they end that way, and you can't really get too mad about the stuff they do in the middle. Joy and Sebastian approached the 10 boys who were busy setting up their ritual next to the big concrete pool of stink water. And they were just boys, even though one of them was pushing 30. They all startled at the sight of her, not because there was anything special about her appearance, but because they'd been expecting Bass to come alone, and they certainly hadn't expected him to show up with a girl. They were each wearing belts that, on the right hip, held an ornate ceremonial dagger and a scabbard, all of them having been purchased online. The boys had been working in 5 pairs, each one with a black marker drawing on the face of his partner, making an outline like a mask around the forehead, cheeks, and chin. As they all turned to face her, Joy forced herself to restrain laughter. Bass said, "Hey guys, huddle up. Can you see the woman next to me?" They all muttered in the affirmative. "Good. This is the Oracle. She visited me with further instructions, and now has made herself visible to all of you. If you have doubts, that's okay. She's not offended. She's happy to show you." Bass turned to her and nodded like, "Do your thing." Joy spread her arms, relaxed, and allowed herself to disperse. She felt wind flowing through her body, swirled herself around the group of boys, and came together behind them, reforming in an instant, all parts effortlessly embracing in formation without a single bump or shove or tangle of wings. Just for fun, she changed her outfit in their eyes, into a flowing white gown that she figured would stand out in this damp campus of smelly concrete and steel. She threw a little cleavage in there, but not too much. These guys would find the hint of it 10 times more intriguing than if she gave away the whole game. She was now looking at the backs of their heads, not all of them having processed the fact that she just vanished from their view approximately 2 seconds ago. "Do not be afraid," she said from behind them, knowing that human language contains few phrases more unsettling. One by one they turned, and, for the second time, startled at the sight of her. One skinny kid raised an assault rifle. The barrel shook, like he could hardly bear the weight of it. Joy smiled. "You can shoot if you wish. It will not harm me, and I will not hold it against you. It is okay to be fearful. When we do not allow ourselves to show fear, the emotion simply comes back in a much uglier disguise. If that piece of steel and plastic helps you deal with your fear, by all means, use it however you see fit. I would suggest that you instead acknowledge that you are afraid. Examine your fear and the reasons for it, and then, once you know it well, simply set it aside. When you have done that, you will find you no longer need your weapon.
Bass said, "Everybody be cool. She's here to help us get to the finish line. She says the vibe isn't quite right yet. You're all too tense and worked up. It's the wrong energy for the first feeding. Leave the egg on the platform and follow us. The Oracle is going to get your mind right."
This, Joy knew, was the pivotal moment. Bass turned and headed back toward the gap in the fence. None of the 10 boys took a step in that direction, all of them exchanging looks, suddenly anxious about deviating from what for them was already a terrifying, dark path. One boy asked, "Where are we going?" He wasn't being aggressive, but clearly had doubts.
"We haven't even got the candles set out yet."
Bass said,
"Just up the hill, out of the magpie's sight. That's what I was told. Don't worry about the egg. If anybody tries to touch it, they'll get their heads bitten off."
Another kid said, "But why? Nobody said anything about this." Bass spun on him, rage flushing his cheeks. Joy didn't think he was acting.
"Because," snarled Bass, "I told the prophet we were ready, but the magpie is detecting doubt, faithlessness. Some of you, I'm not going to say who, are wavering. We can't have that."
Joy knew what Bass sensed, which is that every single one of them had doubts. Waves of them, blasting through their blood and bones like electricity.
"Now," said Bass, "I asked if instead of rooting out the faithless, if we could all step away from the ritual site, go off and get ourselves right as a team, as a family. But we have to do it away from the egg, because right now the magpie is so disgusted with the doubtless that it can't stand the sight of us. You understand now? Will you all come with me? Or do I have to start naming names?"
They let that hang in the air for a moment. Then Bass stomped off, not even looking back to see if he was being followed. Joy smiled, gracefully extended a hand in the direction of the fence, and said, "After you." Then she made brief eye contact with each and every one of the 10 boys. One by one, they dropped their eyes, then followed Sebastian. He led them out through their hole in the fence, then instructed them to get into their vehicles and follow him a couple of miles away, along a rural road that passed through some cornfields and then snaked up a hill to a spot next to the town's water tower. When Joy joined them at their destination, she did her costume change trick once again, now in a short red skirt and top under a black trench coat. The boys were, once again, amazed. They had chosen this spot because it was the highest point. All of Undisclosed stretched out below them. A campfire was burning. The plan had called for a bonfire, but John, Dave, and Amy had apparently not had time to build something on that scale. Or maybe they just struggled lighting whatever damp wood they'd found. It appeared they had wound up smashing and burning several items from John's van, including a broken boat paddle, a pair of wooden Dutch clogs, a framed painting of a woman having sex with a squid, an entire rocking chair, and at least a dozen copies of John's self-published book of erotic poetry, titled Welcome to the Hog Storm. The plan had also been to surround the fire with blankets for everyone to sit on, but apparently the van had contained only one blanket, one beach towel, one sheet of some kind of reflective foil, and a black trash bag. They'd been placed around the fire in a semicircle so that viewable beyond it would be the lights of the town. Bass said, "All right, guys, gather over here." One kid, an overweight boy with bad posture and cheeks scarred with acne, said, "I'm not doubting, Bass. I'm not a doubter. You know that. But, do we have time for this?" Bass struggled for an answer, but Joy stepped in. "Bernie," she said, because it always freaks them out when you know their names, "time is like happiness. The moment you start thinking about it, it fades away." Joy hadn't known how that sentence was going to end when she'd started it, but she was fairly pleased with how it turned out. She examined the boy closely. What she saw in his eyes was starvation. Outside of doctor visits, horseplay, and attacks from bullies, he'd not physically touched another human in 7 years. He lay in bed at night and fantasized, not about sex, but cuddling. He was terrified of actual sexual contact with a woman, afraid of embarrassing himself, disgusted by his own body. As a result, all of his masturbation scenarios were unfulfillable fantasies, perfect girls who were enslaved or brainwashed, if not literal cartoons. He was a ball of unfulfilled desire that had congealed into a black sludge of bitter narcissism and petty rage. Joy stepped toward him. She reached out and lay a hand on his cheek. He flinched, but then let her. She sensed his heart skip a beat when he felt how soft her skin was. Even though she was creating the sensation herself, she knew how to mimic the feeling down to the molecule. That was the part he could never build into his fantasies, the feel of the skin. Her warm palm on his cheek was the greatest moment of his life. She saw it in his eyes. He never wanted the moment to end. It wasn't just the hand, but the aura behind it, the sense that Joy did not find him disgusting. This part was not a performance. She felt pity, mourned for the loss of the good man he could have been. She took away her hand, then hugged him. He initially froze. Not even his own mother did this. His wasn't a hugging family. But then he gave himself to it, squeezed her back, and smelled her hair. Joy put her lips to his ear, and, in a whisper as gentle as a kitten yawn, said, "All you ever wanted was for no one to ever have to feel the way you were made to feel." Slowly, she backed away. For a moment, she thought the boy wouldn't keep his feet, but he did. She gestured to the blanket/towel/trash bag around the fire. "Please, sit. As many of you as can fit on each mat. Sit so that you are looking out over the city, at the street lights, at all the people tucked away in their homes. And I want each of you to hold hands with the person next to you. Good. You two, hold hands. Good. Scoot closer together. Don't be afraid. These are your brothers. They are ready to die for you. We must harness that energy right now. Breathe in. Deep breaths. Slowly. Taste the air. Don't talk. Don't think. Don't look at your watches or the clocks on your phones. We have all the time we need. Time obeys us now. Let go. Let yourself drift free from time. Use all of your senses and feel what is happening around you. The world. The brotherhood." They sat in silence around the crackle of the fire. It was apparent now that John had included some dried sage to add a slight ceremonial spice to the air. Then, from somewhere in the darkness behind them, came the soft strum of a guitar, then a gentle drum. Then an echoey voice, gently reassuring them that he never meant to cause them any sorrow or pain. It was Prince, via John's van stereo in some unseen spot in the distance, stating his aching desire to see the world bathe in his purple rain. Joy said, "Can you hear the music?" They all nodded. "Can you see the music? Allow yourself to see it." None answered either way, but their mesmerized expressions answered for them. John had said he didn't know exactly what fungus they'd used in their tea, if it was even something from this world, but he was putting his faith once again in the music, and allowing the power of song to flow through their elevated sense of consciousness. It appeared in this moment that he had been right. Whether they could see it or merely feel it, they were all bathing in the purple rain. They lay immersed in the music, soaking in it. By the time the iconic guitar licks kicked in halfway through, none of the 10 boys seemed to remember what planet he was on. They were in a world of music, of life and light and fire, and the faint spice of the smoke. And then the guitar took on a different tone, became closer, realer. Into view stepped a man playing a guitar that was covered in thick black fur, wearing a mask of chiseled black stone, a vest of human foreskins, a winged Speedo like the one Steen wore in Dune, thigh-high leather boots, and nothing else. He played out the guitar and vocalizations from Purple Rain for several minutes after the song ended, fading it out as he slowly backed away from the camp, the music easing gently into the distance, like a mother's hands withdrawn from an infant that has finally surrendered to sleep. Silence fell over all of them like a blanket. Joy said, "Now lie back, all of you. Say nothing. Release the hand you have been holding. Look up at the stars and listen to the music of the world. The crackle of the fire, the breathing of the person next to you, the breeze through your ears. Time means nothing. This moment is ours, for as long as we want it. But listen to what I'm about to say, because it is the most important instruction you will ever receive, in this life or the next. The fate of your eternal being depends on it. If, while you listen to the melody of the silence, you feel like there is somewhere else you should be, if there is someone you never had the chance to say goodbye to, someone you'd like to see one more time, you have the permission to leave. You are released from your obligation to Zarkrax without recrimination or loss of privilege. This is not a trick or a test. You have served well, and your reward will be great, but you cannot leave business undone. You cannot proceed past this point without lingering ties to this world. Now, I will be silent. So will you. If any of your brothers rises to leave this place, you will not speak. You will not try to stop them. If they leave, it only means they were always destined to. In doing so, they are showing more bravery than any they have shown so far. If none of you choose to leave, it will be a profound disappointment, because it will mean some of you are not capable of following your truth." 5 minutes of silence passed, but none had left. Joy waited. 15 minutes. 30. Joy, making no noise whatsoever as she passed over the grass, she could do that, went to the heavy boy she had embraced earlier, kneeled beside him, and put a hand on his shoulder. She leaned over so that, once more, her mouth was all but touching his right ear. "You will meet her in 3 years," she whispered, "but only if you turn yourself into the man worthy of her. Go, shed the skin they forced you to wear." The boy considered, then stood, then walked away, back toward the lane. Then he ran, as fast as he could. A moment later, another boy joined him. Me. I sat with Amy and Gracie on the rear bumper of the van, parked on a narrow gravel lane in between dense green walls of cornstalks. John had finished the Purple Rain guitar solo a while ago, and at this point, all we could do was wait. Gracie whispered, "I don't understand what's happening." I said, "If you intend to keep living here, you'll just have to get used to that feeling." Amy said, "Well, I actually don't understand why John had to be up there in person." "I think he just wanted to be close by in case Joy messed it up or Bass changed his mind." "What would he have done if so?" "I don't know. All I can say is that John has this steadfast belief that he can just guitar his way out of any disaster scenario. He keeps one by his bed." "But what if the music hadn't—" "The cops are coming!" yelled Gracie. She jumped to her feet and was pointing. "A bunch of them. Is that bad? All the boys smell like drugs." Sirens were wailing in the distance, and she was right. It was a lot of them. It was impossible to tell from which direction the sound was coming, but it didn't take a genius to figure out where they were heading. We scrambled to get into the van. Whatever was about to happen when it came time for the egg to open, if anything, we needed to be there when it did. We had to protect the cops from it, if nothing else. By the time I'd driven back to the poop improvement plant, there was a SWAT van and probably all of the city's cop cars parked at the main gate. I suspected if we tried to enter that way that we wouldn't be allowed in, so we drove back toward the Cimmerai's hole in the fence. As we slowed to a stop, I told Amy, "Take Gracie and keep her out of sight for the moment. Over in those trees, wherever. Text John and tell him where you are. Everyone can meet you there. I'll go in and try to explain to the cops what's going on. If they show up at the spot with their guns ready and see us standing there with Gracie, they may decide we're keeping her hostage and just headshot us all."
"Why don't you watch Gracie and let me go in?"
"You know why. If something does emerge from the egg, if it tries to force the issue, even without Bass, there's a good chance that it will be visible to me, but not to you. Otherwise, yeah, I'd agree that you're more suited to talk down a pack of trigger-happy agents of the state." Amy said to Gracie,
"It's better out here anyway. It doesn't stink quite as bad."
Gracie said,
"Are we going to jail?"
I said, no, but didn't clarify that I did think the chances of us all getting perforated by bullets were still extremely high. The last time I reached this point, the ground was a carpet of corpses. I crawled in through the fence and made my way to the middle concrete pool. I found the array of ritual gear the Cimmerai had left here earlier, including 3 plastic bags swarming with flies, a bunch of unlit black candles, and a few gun cases from the kids who left theirs behind. The magpie egg was still sitting on the maintenance platform at the center of the rusty catwalk that bisected the pool, unchanged. I heard approaching voices and tried to assume the least threatening posture I knew. Several members of a SWAT team showed up first, 6 or 7 of them. I guess they acted as the tip of the spear since they had the most armor. Then I noticed that in the distance, pinpricks of headlights were heading down the same road the cops had just traveled. Spectators. Word, it seemed, had gotten out. The SWAT guy nearest me made what I presumed was eye contact through his tinted visor. Instead of waiting for him to ask, I just went ahead and lay down in the wet grass, my hands in the air as high as I could hold them. I said, "Everyone be calm. We found the little girl. She's safe. Her brother too. Everything is fine. It was all a misunderstanding." SWAT guy kept his assault rifle trained on me. I don't know how many AR-15s I'd had pointed at me over the years, but it's a lot. This was one of the better ones. They'd gone with a vertical grip on the front, holographic sights.
"Where is she?"
he yelled. "Close. She's going to go meet up with her brother. My girlfriend is with them. They'll be here in a moment. Everything is fine. We fixed it." He flipped up his visor and pulled down the black cloth mask that had been covering the rest of his face. He had a bushy Lemmy Kilmister mustache sideburns combo, and the expression of a kid who's just reached the front of a 6-hour line to get onto a ride at Disney World. "We heard there was a huge monster coming," said Lemmy the SWAT cop. "Sometime after midnight, right? Did we miss it?" "Some kids were trying something like that, but we talked them out of it. Sort of. It's over, is the point." "Are you sure? What about all these candles? Should we light them?" "The good news," I said, "is that we've also solved the disappearance of your missing detective, police officer, and security guard. See those trash bags? They're full of the remains of the 3 victims, specifically their skins. A DNA test or whatever should confirm it's them. I guess I shouldn't have phrased that as good news, but you know what I mean." I could hear other cops farther back yelling at the spectators who'd apparently shown up. It wouldn't work. If they couldn't get through the front gate, they'd just encircle the facility and find another way in, just like we had. The professional monster enthusiasts would happily deal with a trespassing charge if it meant live-streamed video of a demonic summoning and/or child sacrifice. A spot on the speaking circuit, book deals, podcasts, a chance to host their own show. That silly little fence wasn't going to stand between them and a place on the paranormal expert gravy train. Meanwhile, by now, word would have made it back to town that exciting events were happening at the crap carnival, so we'd also be getting locals who'd always wanted to see something freaky up close. Everybody here wants their own anecdote. I mean, if you run into somebody from Loch Ness, what's the first question you ask them? The rest of the SWAT guys were sweeping the area with their gun barrels, I guess to see if I was just acting as bait for an ambush. I heard one on his radio talking to a street cop over at the gate, learning that this spot was about to be overwhelmed with rubberneckers. Meanwhile, Lemmy moved slowly toward the nearest trash bag. He prodded it with the barrel of his AR-15. It had a fancy side-vented muzzle brake on the end, then pulled open a flap. Still lying in the damp grass, I said, "Dude, isn't that evidence or something? Aren't you contaminating it for the CSI people?"
"There's nothing in here."
He checked the other 2 bags, kicking them open with his boot. He was about to ask me about them, then heard a noise and spun, raising his assault rifle to a spot on my left. I heard John say, "Don't shoot, we've got Gracie. She's fine. Everybody is fine." Bass was walking hand in hand with Gracie. John, Amy, and Joy were behind them, all 3 with their hands up. They were supposed to have waited for some kind of all clear from me before approaching, but apparently somebody had overruled me on that. Joy said, "Any other crisis you need solved? Line 'em up." I said, "Bass, the human remains of the detective and the rest that you guys, found. Where are they?"
"In those bags."
"Not anymore."
"Yummy! Thank you, Mommy. I love you."
Every gun barrel in the vicinity whipped toward the toy egg sitting unattended on the platform. John stepped forward, put his hands over Gracie's ears, and said, "Oh, kiss my fucking shit." Amy said, "What happened? Did it get the final meal? How?" I said, "I don't know. Bass, get Gracie away from here." The egg clicked, cracking open just a bit. Gracie screamed. I saw Bass start to hustle her away, but he didn't seem to know in which direction safety could be found, if it could be found at all. I was reminded of Amy's dilemma in her nightmare. Lemmy said,
"What is that thing? An egg?"
Nobody seemed to care about me anymore, so I went ahead and stood up.
Everybody remain calm.
It's not a real egg. It's just a plastic toy, but it's also kind of a real egg, but maybe not." The egg was in that first stage of the opening process, with a 1/4-inch gap so you could just see inside, if you were close enough. I imagined little kids all around the world trying to peer in to see if their magpie had gold wings. Its spot at the center of the pool was 50 feet from all of us, and it was dark, so nobody had any kind of preview of what was to come. There was another small click, and the shell jumped. Some spring-loaded mechanism inside opening the egg a little more. In a movie, this is where everybody would cock their guns. But that's kind of not how automatic weapons work. These rifles were as cocked as they could get before they'd even arrived at the scene. Voices were muttering from behind us, and I saw an undulating constellation of camera and cell phone lights moving between the pump houses. The oncoming monster tourists had sensed something awesome was about to happen and were picking up the pace. I said to the SWAT cops, "Don't bother shooting the egg. If it's nothing, you'll just be sending stray bullets into the countryside. If it's something they've summoned, bullets probably won't even leave a mark."
"What is that?"
yelled one of the SWAT cops. "Listen! Everybody, shut up and listen!" The egg was chirping. It was a recorded sound from a little speaker inside, singing Happy Birthday and birdsong. Some tourists had arrived with their cameras now, lenses and gun sights focused on the hunk of white and green polka-dotted plastic. No one said a word. The egg finished its song. The shell clicked one final time, springing open fully, like a flower in bloom. Whatever was inside was now fully exposed. Several people trained flashlight beams on the platform, spotlighting the egg like it was about to sing the national anthem before a basketball game. A small, stuffed bird sat silently in the center of the open shell. Then, with perfect comic timing, it flopped over and rolled off onto the metal platform. Trying not to make any abrupt movements, I made my way around the pool to the metal stairs and mounted the catwalk. I reached the platform at the center and picked up the stuffed bird. I tossed it across the pool to Lemmy, who took one hand off his rifle to catch it. "See?" I said. "Just a toy." I looked toward Gracie and said, "It's got some reflective gold trim along its feathers. That's the rarest, right?" Gracie barely raised both fists and, in a deadpan tone, said, "Woo-hoo." Amy let out an exaggerated breath and ran her hand through her hair.
Does that mean we did it? Is it over?
For you, maybe, said Lemmy. He turned his gun to his left and said, Bass Galveston, you are under... John shouted, Look! He was at the lip of the pool, and I already knew what he had seen. Blackness oozing purposefully into the fetid water like a sentient oil spill. Several of the SWAT cops ran to the edge so they could get a look, thrilled that something was finally happening. A few of them were aiming their guns like they were expecting to see sharks swarming in there.
What is that?
Asked one of the cops, watching the black stream zipping quickly into the water.
Are they snakes? It looks like hundreds of snakes.
It's the Terry, hot semen from the balls of Satan himself, said John. We call it Arby's sauce. Back away from it, I shouted before Amy could correct him. That stuff is toxic in ways you wouldn't believe. Don't breathe it. Don't look at it. Don't listen to it. And for the love of God, don't get within grabbing distance of it. I sprinted along the catwalk toward the stairs, leading by example. Grabbing distance? Asked Lemmy. What are you... Another cop started yelling and fired 6 shots into the pool. Hands! He was shouting. There's black hands coming out of it! Someone else fired. I ducked at the noise and jumped down to the grass. Get back! I shouted, flailing my arms to demonstrate what direction back was. Back! Back! Shooting it won't do shit! You! Get back! You too! Incredibly, some of the cops acted on my advice. Or maybe they just saw hundreds of grasping oil-black hands rising from the pool of unthinkable filth and decided they probably couldn't arrest them. Meanwhile, the spectators who were near enough to hear the commotion edged closer to get a better view. Look, said John again. The egg! Something's coming out! His tone implied he was relieved we weren't disappointing the people who'd taken the trouble to be here tonight. Several flashlights flicked up to the platform once more. The egg playset was now just a plastic nest with a pair of white shell pieces lying flat on either side. Something was crawling up from the base. Amy had been right, of course. Inside the toy had been a portal to God knows where, and, ritual or no ritual, something was coming through. Amy yelled at the cop closest to her, You have to get the people away! I agreed with her, but had no idea how this would be accomplished, short of just shooting several of the bystanders to start a stampede. The SWAT team, meanwhile, was focused entirely on the creature being birthed on the platform, eager to have something tangible to train their sights on. I could only make out a shape, something smooth and hard and dark, followed by writhing appendages. When it emerged fully, it was maybe the size of an expensive crab. But then, it grew. The SWAT members held their fire, like they were waiting for its final form before taking it down. The creature rose as if being inflated, reaching a height of 6 feet or so, growing a pair of appendages on each side like arms, its bottom half separated into a pair of legs. Sebastian, a look of dread and anticipation on his face, stepped forward toward the pool, putting his body in front of Gracie. Of course, said Bass softly, watching the horror he'd helped birth into our universe. We summon the most terrifying creature of all. Man. Several cops groaned in disappointment. Lemmy said, Oh, come on, that is bullshit. Joy yelled, Boo! Boo! John said, Hold on, it's probably going to turn into something else. Just be patient, goddammit. The newly born figure on the platform caught just enough light for me to get a glimpse. It was a man. He just looked like a regular, droopy, middle-aged guy. Then I saw his face. I know that guy. That's him, said Lemmy. The missing security guard. Lou. Hey, are you okay? Amy said, Lou? Oh, Lou! I said, Who the fuck is Lou? The guy, said John. From the 4th. Had the thing on his head. He was right, and there was Eve, perched at the top of him, not sucking on his brain, as we now knew, but inflating the man below it, using a skin it had stolen earlier this very day. While we all gawked at him, Lou took a step back from the egg. A column of those black hands then reached up from below, twisting themselves into a single shape that swallowed up the platform. For some reason, this is what finally convinced the cops to start shooting. Gracie screamed at the roar of gunshots splitting the air. Some of the onlookers hit the deck. I yelled, "Stop! Stop! I know for a fact that you're not going to kill that guy. Don't ask me how I know." Nobody could hear me. Amy had put Gracie on the ground and threw herself on top, though I couldn't imagine Amy's body preventing a high-velocity 5.56mm rifle round from punching through her body and Gracie's both. On the platform, the black shapes were writhing and twisting and merging, forming a black knot, all the sauce in the pool collecting to one form and purpose. John shouted, "Look, it's fucking a hole in the space-time continuum!" Some of the SWAT guys stopped shooting, as if that was the reasonable response to what John had just said. The swirling knot of blackness was smoothing itself into a perfect sphere, at least 8 feet in diameter, as if huge invisible hands were sculpting it like a snowball. Lou turned, made eye contact with me, waved, then walked into the sphere, which swallowed him whole. As he passed through the surface, there was a sort of disturbance or ripple across the sphere, and, in that moment of interference, I could see into it, like a crystal ball. I saw a distorted view of Amy answering the door of my apartment. Then I faintly heard Lou say, "Sorry to bother you, miss, but the cops just dropped me off and I don't know what in the hell is going on." The sphere vanished with a faint thwop, like a child's hand slapping a clown's bare thigh. This was followed by the dead silence of now dozens of people who also, in fact, did not know what in the hell was going on. Everyone had stopped shooting, some of the cops taking this opportunity to reload for whatever came next. But the open magpie egg, now truly spent, just sat innocently on the platform, an inert hunk of plastic. "Where did he go?" asked Lemmy. I waved him off. "He's gone. He traveled back in time. It's a whole thing. Don't ask me to explain anything time travel related. I'll just get mad." Amy was helping brush grass off of Gracie. Bass asked her if she was all right, then sat down next to her, as if exhausted. Bass said, "I don't think I understand." John said, "I'm also confused." Amy said, "According to the book, the prophet is going to be reborn from a jewel in the earth. They're talking about your resin cube, the one we trapped Eve inside, the one that wound up in the river after Ricardo ran off the road. They're going to find it in 2112, crack it open, and then Eve is going to inflate a guy, and he'll claim to be the prophet reborn. Everything on the 4th, selling the doll, all of that, everything we did, was orchestrated by Zarkrax to fulfill that prophecy." I said, "Wait, did the prophecy come first, or did Zarkrax see how the 4th of July thing played out and then write the prophecy around it so that it would appear to be predestined?" "And is everyone still doomed?" asked John, which probably was the more relevant question. I thought I knew the answer, which was that it wasn't up to us to break this casual time loop situation. Only Sebastian could do it, and for whatever reason, we were still on track to get the bad ending. "The black oil is gone," said Lemmy, ignoring us and peering into the scummy water. "Where did it go? Is that stuff in the water supply? What is happening?" We had no good answer for him. I faced the tourists, each marked by a twinkle of light attached to a recording device. "Show's over," I said, knowing that apparently wasn't true. "Nothing to see here. Just go." I was interrupted by an electronic buzz, like this was a quiz show and whatever I was about to say was declared the wrong answer in advance. It was emanating from all around us, from every cop's radio. It was some kind of alert, a much angrier and shriller version of that obnoxious Amber Alert noise I can never figure out how to get off my phone. Lemmy pulled his radio off his belt, looking confused and alarmed by the noise. The SWAT members were exchanging glances, It was like they knew what the alarm technically meant, but hadn't expected to ever actually hear it. John said, "What the hell is that?" Lemmy held up a hand to silence him. The buzzing ended, and a stern-sounding female voice took over, playing like a chorus from all directions at once. "Attention all units. A Class Omega emergency has been declared. This means they are going to destroy the fucking town as soon as the satellite can be armed and fired. I repeat, get the fuck out of there. This will be the last announcement. We are all leaving. Holy fucking shit. Over." Another SWAT cop asked Lemmy,
Is that real? The Class Omega thing? I remember it from training, but always thought they were just messing with us.
Instead of answering, Lemmy turned to the bystanders.
"Listen up, everybody. You know how in some zombie movies, the government blows up the whole town to stop the outbreak? And how they've tried to do that here at least once before? It's happening now. Again. The fire order has been given. We're getting the fuck out of here. You've got just a few minutes until impact. I don't even know. Good luck."
Amy said,
Well, tell them to call it off. We stopped the summoning. It's over.
"Look!"
I don't even know who said it, but it wasn't necessary anyway. The area was being lit from a bright speck in the sky. Apparently, we hadn't gotten quite as much warning this time. I heard terrified gasps from behind us. Thor was coming. I yelled,
"What are we going to do?"
Amy hurried over to Bass.
Can you teleport everyone out of here?
"No,"
He said.
"There's too many. I could do me and Gracie and maybe one more."
Then get Gracie out of here. At least save her. The rest of us will just run for it.
I didn't think even the most athletic person here could run to a safe distance, not if the time captain had been right about the destructive power of this thing. I heard that familiar air-rending roar from above. I tried to remember how much time we'd had last time, once it reached this point. 1 minute? Less?
No,
yelled Gracie, in the angriest little girl voice she could manage.
we're not going. Bass, send it away. Make a hole down here and just get rid of it.
"How?"
He asked, staring up at the doomsday projectile.
"Where do I send it? I'll just blow up something else."
I said, "Outer space?"
"I can't do outer space. Not without help."
The object was now too bright to look at directly. I swore I could already feel the heat. I said, "Then send it to Siberia or something. Siberia 100 years from now, or 100 years ago. Can you do that?" His expression said he had no idea if he could or not. Still, Sebastian ran up to the pool. He did some wizard moves with his hands, working frantically, muttering alien words I couldn't make out. Gracie watched him with a look of apprehensive pride, like she was rooting for him to make title-winning free throws in a game in which he'd already scored 40. Like the rest of us were about to see him do what he did best. I could feel the swirling energy in the air, making the hairs on my arms stand up on end. The effect of the spell was barely visible, just a weird little ripple hovering in space directly above the pool where the egg had been. Bass was trembling with the effort, like he was being asked to hold a burning car aloft while a dwarf wailed on his nuts. He fell to his knees, still verbalizing the spell, spittle flying out with each word as he strained to channel the immense power through his body. One leg of his pants turned dark as his bladder let go. Blood oozed from his nose. The rift fluctuated and blinked, fading in and out of reality. I sensed that if the Thor projectile struck while Bass's spell was waning, that it'd smash right past it, impact the pool below, and vaporize all of us before we even felt the shock wave. The projectile streaked down. Everything was heat and light, and a noise like the entire planet had been dropped into God's coffee grinder. Then, instead of detonating with the force of a large nuke, the white-hot, telephone pole-sized rod passed through the portal Bass had created and blinked out of view. Instantly, the sound dissipated, the displaced air washing over us like a hot wind, strong enough that it pushed back some bystanders to the ground. But that was it. Bass collapsed as if he'd taken a sniper round to the skull. I ran toward him. The boy was not moving or breathing. When I arrived, I saw blood streaming across his cheeks. From behind me, I heard Lemmy ask,
Was that it? Was that the satellite thing?
Amy came and joined me in kneeling over Sebastian. The tourists were starting to draw in again. The ones in back had presumably never been clear on the danger at all. They just heard some people shouting and briefly saw a bright flash. I could hear them back there, asking each other what happened. What had they missed? John and Joy arrived. All of us gathered around Bass's body. We exchanged looks, no one sure what to say. We just stood over him, and I think we all had the same thought, that maybe this was, in fact, the only way the Zarkrak cycle could have ever been stopped, that this is how it had to be. This worldwide spell, with all its millions of components, was like a piece of supernatural software, and maybe the only thing that stops it from running is deleting a particular line of code. But in that moment, I couldn't escape noticing that the apparent linchpin of the apocalypse just looked like a dead 17-year-old boy. I glanced at John, had a sudden flashback, and thought, at least Sebastian got his big hero moment at the end. And what were his last words? Oh, right. Not without help. John lit a cigarette and said, he could have gotten himself to safety easily. He had that power. Instead, he used it to save all of us. And nobody out in the world will ever know. He was talking to Gracie, I think, but she wasn't listening. She stepped right past John and nudged Bass with her foot. Hey, get up. Amy said, Honey, he's gone. Hey, Sebastian the Crab, get up. I said, all that power. It felt like I was standing next to lightning that just kept striking and striking. It was too much for him. I think something just popped in his brain. What, because his nose is bleeding? Said Gracie, annoyed. He gets nosebleeds all the time. He gets them when he thinks too hard about algebra. Get up, dork. Bass lay there, lifeless. The crowd around us having again gone dead silent. How do you explain it to her? Hey! Gracie screamed. Everyone flinched, including Bass. His eyes blinked open. He felt the wetness on his cheek and wiped at the blood. He noticed his piss-soaked jeans and let out a disgusted grunt. In a raspy voice, he said, Did it work? No, said Gracie. We're all smushed. The whole town. It all blew up. Stop being dramatic and get up. Gracie pulled him to his feet. Amy gasped with relief, chuckling a little to herself. Okay, she said. Now it's over. I said, what he just did would have killed any normal man, but he withstood it, thanks to the electrolytes and 400 milligrams of caffeine and fight piss energy drink. Lemmy found the collector's edition magpie on the ground and kicked it. The toy bounced off the concrete wall of the clarifier pool, rolling to a rest in the damp grass next to a scatter of spent shell casings. The tourists behind us were muttering to each other, now browsing around the area for something interesting to film. No, said Lemmy. That can't be it. That sucked. We didn't even get to do anything. Amy stood, brushing grass off of her knees. What, because you didn't get to kill a monster? When this is done right, it never comes to that. I'm sorry to disappoint you. John. Shut the fuck up, said Gracie. Look, the bird. All eyes shifted to the discarded stuffed magpie on the ground. John spun toward it, fists at the ready. The bird was twitching. No, its wings were flapping. The magpie was, in fact, alive. Look, said the SWAT cop, who had the facial hair of Civil War General Ambrose Burnside. It's a genuine haunted toy! Kill it! He pulled out a sidearm and pumped bullets into the ground, missing the tiny stuffed bird entirely. The toy rightened itself, testing its wings. Its stuffed head turned from side to side, as if surveying the strange world it had just been born into. Other cops gathered round and opened fire, pummeling the grass around the toy and sending hunks of moist dirt into the air. Hold your fire, said Burnside the SWAT cop.
"I think we got it."
It appeared the bird had stopped moving. John, however, wasn't convinced. John said,
"Joy, go get the—"
"Shit!" said Burnside.
"It's still alive!"
The bird, now riddled with bullet holes and bleeding wads of white stuffing, once again righted itself and flapped its wings. A couple of bystanders saw it and drew closer, including a group of college kids with a camera and strong portable lights, probably pros doing a live stream. More tourists were flocking in behind them, hoping to salvage some usable video from this fiasco. The magpie, flapping its tiny, battered wings, rose a few feet into the air. Everyone gasped. It flew higher and higher, reaching an altitude of about 20 feet. Amy said,
"Everybody calm down. We don't even know if it's dangerous."
With a shriek, the stuffed bird tore itself apart in midair. Something was erupting from within. Vast, dark wings unfurled from the sides of the plush animal. Wicked talons sprouted from below. A serrated beak burst from the top. The surface of the newly born monster was squirming and rippling. In the wings, John saw rotting rats and tiny flopping fish skeletons, as if the creature was constructed from every pet that had ever been flushed down a toilet and every rodent that had ever drowned in sewer water. Before their eyes, the bird grew to the size of an eagle, then a pterodactyl, then a single-engine airplane. The bystanders' and SWAT cops' reaction to this was total indifference. The shredded remains of the original magpie toy fell to the grass, and the eyes of the gawkers followed it down.
"It's dead,"
said somebody, totally oblivious to the giant and still growing monstrosity spreading its wings overhead, now blotting out half of the stars from John's view. John found Dave in the crowd, and without a word from John, Dave said,
"They can't see it."
"See what?" asked Burnside. Above him, the magpie grew and grew. Its serrated beak was now long enough to bite a car in half.
"It doesn't matter,"
shouted John to Burnside and everyone else.
"Run, now! There's another projectile coming. This is all gonna blow."
If the bystanders heard John, they apparently didn't believe him. Amy made her way over, probably reacting to John's and Dave's panic rather than the presence of the bird. She was probably just about to ask what it was she couldn't see up there, when everyone flinched and clutched their ears. The magpie had opened its massive beak and emitted that same psychic cry that had debilitated John and his crew when it was still in the egg. The bystanders, who couldn't see the creature, it seemed, could definitely receive that terrible screech in their skulls. The magpie, now the size of a Lear jet, lowered its head to scan the crowd. It cried out again, then reached out with a set of black talons big enough to palm an elephant. It went right for Officer Burnside, aiming for his midsection. The man had no idea what was coming. With two massive claws, the magpie reached out and snatched with them, just to the side of the man's hip. John initially thought the creature had missed in its attempt to disembowel its victim, but then it pulled back, and John saw what it had pinched between those two talons.
"Watch out!" shouted John. "It's got a gun!"
The magpie began firing wildly into the crowd. One tourist took a bullet to the chest. A SWAT cop was shot in the thigh. The other cops, still unable to see the magpie itself, fired at whatever poltergeist was holding the stolen Glock. Handfuls of undead mice and fish flew off with each impact. Otherwise, the magpie didn't seem to mind. The monster reached down with its other foot and grabbed the tourist who'd just been shot. With one quick snip of its massive beak, it bit off the girl's face. It then screeched with a volume that shook the ground, flapped its wings, and then faded from sight, becoming just as invisible to John as it had been to everyone else. All that he could see was the hovering handgun, and, just as with Swallow, the severed face sliding down its gullet. The disembodied face, somehow, was still screaming. Gunfire roared, the entire SWAT team and at least two armed bystanders shooting at the space in front of them that, to their eyes, was now just a floating, screaming face, and, 20 feet below it, a hovering semi-automatic pistol. The magpie apparently responded by picking up 3 more people in the crowd and snipping off each of their faces like they were the tips of new cigars. That's only apparently what happened, because from John's viewpoint, 3 screaming people floated into the air before each of their faces peeled themselves off from their skulls. It's not 100% certain that something unrelated hadn't caused this to happen. Regardless, the end result was a quartet of howling, disembodied faces now swirling around the air inside the magpie's invisible belly. That, at least, solved the problem of the crowd refusing to evacuate. Everyone was in full stampede now, including the SWAT team. Everyone was sprinting in the same direction, toward the main gate where all the vehicles were parked. The swirling bundle of screaming faces floated along with the crowd, the invisible magpie having no problem whatsoever keeping up. Hell, the thing was being kept aloft by magic. For all John knew, the bastard could zip along at the speed of light if it wanted. Another tourist, an old man, got snatched into the air. 2 seconds later, his body landed on the grass, his face a bloody, half-eaten lasagna. Amy ran up and yelled, "We need to occupy it so everyone can get away!" Dave responded by running back toward the bird. "Hey!" he shouted to the space where he assumed the creature was. "It's us! It's John and Dave! We're the face versions of collector's items. Forget those people. Take us! But not Amy. We fired her. She sucks." They had no way of knowing what the magpie's reaction to this was, if any. John sensed movement, a shifting of the wind, or maybe just the hateful psychic energy that radiated from the creature. Whatever it was, John felt it brush past him, and then there was a scream. A child's scream. It was Gracie. Bass was right next to her, but could see only that Gracie was in distress, was being squeezed by something invisible to him, as if the sulfur stink in the air had somehow solidified and gone on a rampage. Amy ran over with the intent of grabbing the little girl and pulling her away. She found her path obstructed by invisible talons, trying in vain to pry the child loose. John and Dave both ran in that direction, John with his obsidian dagger at the ready. The magpie snatched both of them with its other foot, an invisible curl of squirming dead things squeezing him and Dave together and lifting them into the air. Dave said, "If it swallows our faces, let's just chew our way out." John could think of at least 3 flaws in that plan. The magpie was pulling Gracie toward its maw first. It fed on pain and must have instinctively known that that was the most dickish thing to do. There were gunshots from below. Bullets whizzed past. Bass had collected one of the Colt's discarded rifles from the grass and was firing it at the magpie in a fit of blind rage. It had no effect. Even from his spot suspended in the air, John could read the boy's expression, his realization that he was too late, his change of heart, his attempt to redeem himself from the dark side. It wasn't going to matter. The horror he'd set into motion was too far gone. Now Gracie was going to pay for it, and, after her, the whole world. Bass presumably had not known prior to today that a single human being could fuck up this hard. But John could have told him, if he'd asked. At the exact moment when it all seemed the most hopeless, John spotted a flash of flesh tone out of the corner of his eye, plowing their direction. It was the anal massage van, roaring between the pump houses and rumbling against the current of fleeing tourists, their bodies lunging aside like toppled bowling pins. The van ran full speed toward the magpie, braked, and spun around in the grass. The rear doors flew open, and out from the inside came a spray of tiny, flailing figures. A flock of 20 haunted, positive-energy dolls flew across the night air and attached themselves to the magpie like a swarm of angry bees. The magpie shrieked and dropped all 3 of its prizes into the grass below. John thumped onto the ground and felt the crack of broken ribs. Joy jumped out of the van and ran to where he and Dave had landed. "That won't hold it long," she said. "Get in. We'll hit it with the music." They didn't need to be asked twice. Not eager to get snatched up by the monster's talons again, Gracie sprinted toward the side door of the van. Amy headed for the passenger seat. John headed for the driver's door, only to be shoved aside at the last moment by Joy. She pushed her way in and said, "Get in the back. You never let me drive." "You drove us here, and how do you even know how to work the stereo?" "John," she said, placing a hand on each of his shoulders, I am more competent than you. She got behind the wheel, and John headed for the side door, where he encountered Sebastian climbing in ahead of him. Gracie was already inside, having pressed herself against the far wall and pulled her legs to her chest, ready for the grown-ups to fix the problem. Before pulling himself inside, John tried to check the status of the invisible monster overhead. It was now firing around with its stolen pistol, shooting haunted dolls off its body. Then it ran out of bullets, and John saw a tiny pistol magazine float off the corpse of a slain SWAT cop and toward the suspended pistol. The two objects weren't quite merging in the air. The magpie was trying to reload, but seemed to be struggling to do it with its gigantic invisible talons. John climbed inside and slammed the door closed.
Everyone, plug your ears.
He leaned up between the front seats.
Joy, hit the power button. Then scroll to the track labeled DEFCON 5.
DEFCON 5? Screw that. Where's DEFCON 1?
DEFCON 5 is the last resort track. That's the most serious situation.
No, it's not. The scale goes the other way. DEFCON 5 means everything is fine.
Amy said.
She's right.
Either way, the track is called... Everyone tumbled to the side, like they were on the bridge of the Enterprise and had just got hit with a torpedo. The whole van had been lifted into the air. Dents and holes were punctured in the roof by a serrated beak they could not see.
It's got us in its mouth, said Dave. Hit the music.
Joy was in the process of scrolling through the tracks for DEFCON 5 and struggling to find it. John had alphabetized the playlist by the surname of the band's lead guitarist. When the entire van tilted down, going entirely vertical, ass up, they were being swallowed. Everyone tumbled down to the cockpit. John fell between the seats and landed on the windshield, his face pressed against the glass, granting him a view of the ground about 50 feet below. Joy was on top of him. Dave was on top of her. John tried to snake his hand over in the direction of the stereo console. A thigh and a butt were in his way. He heard a chorus of inhuman howling from outside the windshield. On the other side of the glass, from John, was the mass of swallowed faces, each contorted in a state of pain and despair. That meant the van was in the magpie's belly now, the bird having apparently decided to just swallow the vehicle whole and collect the faces inside at its leisure. Dave said,
John, move your foot like 6 inches to the right.
He did.
No, your other right.
The windshield gave way. It didn't shatter, it just popped out whole. John tumbled out into the nothingness, landing on the squishy wall of the magpie's invisible stomach, feeling squirming undead creatures writhing under him. Joy landed on top of him, then Dave, then Amy. John twisted around to see the van suspended above, twitching in the magpie's throat or its pyloric valve or whatever. Bass was hanging out of the windshield and slipping, with seemingly no hope of getting back inside. That kind of dangling off a ledge grip strength only exists in action movies. From within the tangle of limbs, Dave said,
John, if we die here, I want my last words to be this. Our life together was duh filthy.
Amy and Joy voiced their agreement, but John thought he could make out movement inside the shadowy interior of the van. Tiny limbs and blonde hair. John assumed Gracie was climbing out to try to help Bass, but instead she was trying to work the controls on the dash. Everyone was shouting instructions at her that she almost certainly couldn't hear. But then, after a seemingly endless stretch of tense moments, DEFCON 5 erupted. It was Freebird, queued up to begin at the 4-minute, 55-second mark, right as Alan Collins' guitar solo was unleashed. Every watt of the van sound system was cranked to the max, blasting sonic waves like the orgasmic cries of a climaxing Zeus. The effect on the magpie was that of a grenade detonating inside a chicken. Whatever unfathomable dark energy had stitched the creature into being was torn asunder. The monstrosity shrieked, and John had the sensation of being thrown free from the blast, only he and the others weren't flying away from the belly of the creature, but from the universe, from time and reality itself. There was tremendous noise, and then there was an even tremendoser silence. Me. For a moment, I thought I was dead. It wasn't the first time, and I recovered quickly. I assume when I actually die for good, I won't think anything at all. The events that had led up to this moment were all a hazy blur. John's account will have to suffice, which I know is unfortunate, but my memory of the climax exists in seemingly hundreds of different iterations, always ending in some kind of gruesome failure. Until this one, which seemed to have ended in a timeout, as if Zarkrax had rage quit the game. All was silent, the total stillness that I recognized as a world in which time had been paused. I tried to get a sense of my surroundings. I was at the wastewater treatment plant, or on the patch of land that had at one point been the wastewater treatment plant. The clarifier pools had been replaced with some kind of white domed structures. Farther in the distance, I saw horizontal tubes, hundreds of feet long. They were filled with some kind of bright green organic substance under artificial light, like they'd been stuffed with guacamole. I saw no staff on site, but it was a working facility. Mechanized units were paused in the act of crawling over the tubes, and some kind of drones hovered silently overhead. Though, considering the world was frozen in place, for all I knew they were in the process of plummeting to Earth. Where the town had been, on the other side of the cornfield, were now 3 high-rises, and farther in the distance I saw vast, low buildings, surrounded by layers of fencing, interspersed with narrow towers. Several black objects, shaped like diamonds, hovered silently overhead. I heard faint voices. I walked toward the sound, near where the fences used to be. There was now just a row of hovering white pillars that I had assumed served as some kind of security apparatus. Strolling along, there was Sebastian and the old man version of himself who'd accosted me in the smoke shop the other day. Bass seemed confused to be there, like he'd been suddenly abducted into the encounter just as I had been, back when I was trying to eat my pretzel.
"When did you figure out my identity?"
asked the old man. It took Bass a moment to orient himself before answering. I got the impression he had been conscripted into spontaneous meetings like this before, whisked away to strange times and places he knew not to inquire about.
"I don't know,"
he said, briefly glancing at one of the hovering security pod things as they passed.
"At first, I thought you were nobody at all. Thought all the stuff with Silva and the move had broken my brain. Then, when you were showing me things, predicting events, I thought you were some kind of ghost from the future. When I figured out you were me, it wasn't like some huge jaw-drop moment. I felt like I kind of always knew. Kind of like when a memory comes back to you, I guess. Then there is no question as to whether I want the best for you," said the old man. "You are me. I am you." "See, I don't think that's true, though," replied Bass.
I followed them out of fear of letting the conversation get out of earshot. I saw no indication that they knew I was there, or cared. Hell, maybe I wasn't actually there at all.
"There was a point not too long ago," continued Bass, "when I thought, I don't really want to do this. But then I thought, well, I've come this far, might as well. Like I was only doing it because I was doing it, you know? And then, I think when you get old, it's just that. Over and over. You're 1,000 miles down some path you set way back when. So the thought of going back is crazy to you, even if the path you're on is the craziest possible bullshit in the universe. So I think you're just me, only if I didn't turn around when I saw things going in the toilet. You're a me that has gone too far down the path."
The old man sighed.
"If we back out now, she will have died for nothing. Everything we hate will be laughing at us. Dad will be laughing at us. He'll have gotten away with everything." "Okay, but see, this is what I figured out tonight. When I was sitting there stoned earlier, I was thinking, this is still all about Dad, you know? Remember when, or maybe this was too long ago for you, when I was showing Gracie something on a Pokemon game, and Dad saw us and told me I was too old to be playing it. And I wasn't playing it, I was just showing her something on her game. But I got so mad that I started playing it. I don't even like those games, they all suck. but I did it just to spite him. Think about how dumb that is. I was putting him in charge of how I spent my time. If I turn myself into a negative image of Dad, that's still a picture of Dad. You say he's laughing at us. Why do I care who he's laughing at? Let him laugh. I just want to be free of him, all the way, forever."
"It's not about him," replied the old man, the exasperation evident in his voice. "It's about all the people like him, all the hypocrites and clergy, pushing shame and callousness. Do you remember how fast the other kids moved on from Syl? The day of her funeral, everything at school stopped. But then, the day after, it was like nothing had happened. Kids laughing in the halls."
"You're asking if I remember? Dude, for me, that all literally just happened last year."
"Well, when you leave high school, you'll find the whole world is still just that. High school. All those kids with their cliques and fads, they're the ones who make people like Dad rich. Have you seen it yet? The results? The magpie, I mean, in its final form. Look."
The old man looked to the sky. So did Sebastian. So did I. The sky, however, was gone. Regina had described the sky in her dream as having been blotted out, but I sensed the blackness overhead as a living mass, a swarm. I detected fluid movements of shadows twisting and swirling in the air, and glimpsed hundreds of pairs of burning eyes, bright with malicious, alien cunning. Then I blinked, and the blackness was gone, and what replaced it was a river of human faces, howling and weeping, millions of them, enough to occupy our entire field of vision in every direction. Over the chorus of the shrieking faces was another worse noise, a high-pitched laugh that chewed into my eardrums like a pair of ravenous worms. It was the laugh of an immense, broken mind, of a child whose only hobby is torturing neighborhood cats, who's found he suddenly has the powers of a god. Bass had stopped walking. It seemed to me like his terror was making it hard for him to stay on his feet, but he was trying to hide it. Like any teenager, he didn't want to show fear in front of the older guy he wanted to impress. "This is because of me?" asked Bass. "Because of us?"
"No," replied the elder Bass. "This is because of them. This is the world getting what it deserves, which is to be burned to the ground. Before it blinks out of existence, let Silva's name be the last they hear. Let her name be the word that brings about the nothingness."
"No, I don't want this."
"We're doing it for her. If you take it back, it's the same as killing her all over again."
Bass seemed to have no answer for this, but then I noticed that he was merely distracted. This would seem impossible, considering the howling cloud of the damned rolling past overhead, but he was entranced by something moving on the ground, something alive, in a world that was supposedly frozen in place. A speck of white. A mouse. It was so white that it almost glowed, scurrying across the invisible boundary marked by the hovering security pillars, heading toward the nearest dome. Bass broke away from the old man and followed the mouse, intensely curious. The old man shuffled after him with his cane, demanding Bass stick to the mission, that he not throw it all away. The mouse followed the curve of the dome until it vanished from view. Bass chased after it, jogging now, and I chased after him. I made my way around the dome and had to skid to a halt. Bass had abruptly stopped in front of me, in a state of shock. Sitting in the grass before him was a girl in her mid-teens, wearing a yellow sundress with sneakers and a baseball cap. She wasn't glowing. She wasn't translucent. She didn't have wings. She was just a girl, dressed for the heat, maybe looking the way she had on her last day on Earth. Sebastian fell to his knees, crying in a way that I wasn't sure his body could survive, like it was tearing itself apart with jerks and spasms of grief. In between ragged breaths and sobs,
He was saying he was sorry. So sorry. The girl smiled, then looked embarrassed. Get a hold of yourself, Crab. You're making a scene.
I fucked everything up, Sil. All of it. I fucked it all up. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
You can make it right, she said softly. You know why? Because you're alive. Do you have any idea how much easier that makes everything? I'm jealous. Trying to affect stuff from this side is like trying to play chess by blowing on the pieces. I do not recommend it.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Of course not. You're still a kid. Don't overcomplicate it. You'll just give yourself a nosebleed. For now, find something that's broken and fix it. If you're going to ask me where to find broken things, well, just start walking and you'll run into one. That's all I can offer you from over here.
I don't know if I can. I'm not who you think I am, Sil.
You're not who you think you are. This can all work out. Not just you either. All of this. I know for a fact it can. I've seen it. The old man arrived at the scene, brushing past me as if I either wasn't there or simply wasn't worthy of notice.
It did work out, he sputtered. This was all for you, and others like you. Don't you see that? You owe it to all the rest, everyone like you, to let us finish our work.
Silva just sighed, rolled her eyes, and ignored him. The old man was still just her dumb big brother. He was being a baby, and she just needed to wait for the tantrum to pass. Old Bass reached out and grabbed his younger self by the arm, pulling him away.
That's not even her, he snarled. It's a trick. If she were really here, she'd tell you.
Bass yanked his arm out of the old man's grasp and said,
Dude, would you fuck off?
It was the voice you'd use to dismiss an annoying drunk at a bar, or what an embarrassed teenager would use to make his little brother stop demanding to play with the older kids. I have tolerated you, but I have decided to do so no longer, and that decision is final. And with that, the prophet of Zarkrax vanished. There was no sound, no howl of rage, no fade or dissolve from reality. He just wasn't there, because he had never been. Of course he hadn't. How could he? It was ridiculous to even suggest it. Sebastian and Silva resumed their conversation, but I found I was being led away by my elbow. Grabbing my arm was my own hand, only it had a manicure. Fancy Me said, Let them have their privacy. The two don't have long together, and what they say is none of our business. I saw that there were, once again, stars overhead. Is this it? Is it over? I feel like I've asked that 1,000,000 times, and it never is. Looks like it's over to me, he said, and now I know why I could never see past a certain point when playing out these scenarios. It's because only yours makes it this far. I'm going to be frank. I'm not at all clear what has happened here. That doesn't surprise me. The mouse, was that Silva? So did Zarkrax's prophet's dead sister kill the time captain? Did she do it on purpose? First of all, I want you to think about how your life has gotten to a place where you can say that string of words out loud and have all of it make sense to you. But the answer is yes. Why? Why would she kill him, I mean? I saw on his face the very look I've probably given to 1,000 slow drivers I've gotten stuck behind in a no-passing zone. He said, The idiot that you are for some reason calling the time captain is Tim Kaplan, a local mattress salesman and an amateur bodybuilder. He survived a dose of the sauce and experienced a vision that told him that he alone could reset the world if we jacked up our chances to save it. It was Zarkrax that gave him the vision, to make sure he would be here, where the hole in time would appear, again and again, to loop us back through, over and over. But why would Zarkrax keep giving us chances to undo the ritual? Jesus, you're like a walking public service announcement for brain fog. Those repeated attempts were the ritual. It required more spiritual suffering than was available on the planet. So, it created a cycle to repeat the same loop of time. The same cult getting started in each one. like an Old West evangelist hopping from town to town, leaving behind a new church in each. Only instead of towns, it's parallel timelines, looping the process over and over, planting the same seed that would grow into the same movement in each. Us and the time idiot were unwittingly part of the mechanism, reaching that crisis point and asking for another chance, again and again and again. The result was that the same minds and souls were getting enslaved across hundreds of possible variations of their lives, and they all counted toward the ritual. All of those shackled minds, all of those collected faces, all of those nightmare timelines running in parallel. That's what Zarkrax is. The cycle of pain looping until it reaches critical mass, until Kaplan was killed in John's bedroom wall, finally stopping the loop, breaking the mechanism. And we, meaning my timeline's version of me, and John, and Amy, and I guess Joy, we did the rest, right? It's all fixed? Collapsed into the good timeline? The bad timelines won't happen. They'll be erased now. Just like the old, corrupted version of Sebastian Galvatron. He, or I, turned to face me. "What are you talking about?" he spat. "Yours is all that will remain, yeah, but yours is one of the bad timelines." "What are you talking about? Everybody's making it out alive. I mean, not everybody, but I won't. My Amy won't. And others that you don't even know about. Don't you get it? When I leave this conversation, I won't be anymore. I'll have never been. It'll just be you." But that was going to happen to all of us but one regardless. So it sounds like you're mad that it wasn't me who got erased, and my version is the only one who did this correctly, so... You did this right, and absolutely everything else wrong. In my world, Amy has health insurance. We travel. We have friends. We have a lot. More than I can even make you understand right now. But you don't have John. Look around at your life. Where he is. It always looks like this. All the mess, the chaos. He always ends badly. And yeah, that's tragic or whatever, but the world is full of tragic fuck-ups, and you need to find better friends. You owe it to yourself. You owe it to the world. If I hadn't met John, I wouldn't be here at all. Well, my John died in a drunk driving accident 7 years ago, and I'm here. No, you're not me. That's what you said. That night you came to me when I was sleeping on John's sofa. You said I'm not you, and on that we agree. There's something missing from you. Something he brings out of us. Something I wouldn't give up for myself. Not for anything. Fancy me was now showing the same annoyance that old Bass had shown with his younger self. Don't romanticize people's flaws. That's what's wrong with our culture. No, what's ruining the culture is worshipping people who pretend they don't have flaws. We're all broken, and you couldn't pull this off because you didn't have John. Keep telling yourself that, and when you go back to your little life, try to remember what was lost to give it to you, what had to be sacrificed. Every moronic decision you make wipes out a universe of better possibilities. I'm doing my best, dude. You can tell that to anybody else on Earth, and maybe they'll believe you, but I know for a fact it isn't true. He sighed and rubbed his face in a way that I'd done 100,000 times in my life. He shook his head, smiled a little, then stuck out his hand. I never did enjoy my own company. Look, you saved mankind or whatever, so that's pretty good. I shook his hand. He had a strong grip. I said, I'll be better. He turned his face up at the stars, taking them in for the last time. You'd better be. He sighed and closed his eyes. All these moments will be lost in time, like piss in a sewage plant. Give your Amy a hug for me. Before I could reply, I was gone.